Wednesday, October 7th, 2020, Monaco 64, home of alternative economics and contrarian views. Today I want to talk about the global reserve currency status. There's been a great deal spoken about, written about the petrodollar over the last few years. I've made about 20 videos. I've got a petrodollar files where I talk in length about what's happening to the petrodollar, why the petrodollar came about. But one thing I'd like to reiterate, the dollar is not going to go away anytime soon. It's still going to be there. It's just that its relative importance will keep diminishing. I think we're going to a multipolar world in terms of reserve currencies. One example I give is of the British pound, which used to be the global reserve currency up until, I would say, 1945, up until the end of World War II, together with the US dollar. And yes, it's fallen from grace. It's not the global reserve currency anymore, but it's still one of the reserve currencies that other countries keep. I think 5% of foreign reserves are kept in British pound. The British pound is still part of the SDR basket. Yes, the importance of the UK economy, of the British economy in the world has fallen sharply relative to what it used to be 120 years ago, but it's still an important economy. How does it impact the country, the people living in the country? Well, I would say it's a lower standard of living. That's what it does, because there's less demand for their currency from abroad. And why does that happen? Well, because basically the country produces less than it consumes. It builds current account deficits with other parts of the world. So it's just like a family or an individual. Let's say you start out your life, you do well, and you build up your wealth. And then for some reason, you just start spending, you stop working. At one point, you won't be as wealthy and prosperous as you were 10, 15 years before, because you stop working, you become spendthrift, and that happens to countries, and I think it's happening to the United States. And then on the other side of the spectrum, you've got countries in the emerging markets, countries that have been actually working really hard to get back into prosperity, countries like China, India, Russia. I'm not sure I'd include Brazil in that, but a lot of countries that were decimated or have been, how can I say, economically haven't done well in the last 200 years. They're coming back. They're going to become the wealthy ones with all the savings. And eventually they will as well lose that status. But that's what I think is going to happen. Of course, the petrodollar was created after Nixon closed the gold window. Why did Nixon close the gold window? Well, because the United States was starting to abuse its exorbitant privilege that they could issue the reserve currency. It had to be backed by gold, but people were starting to notice, the people who traded with the United States, the main trading partners in Europe, Japan, and other countries, they started to notice that the United States was inflating. What does that mean? They were issuing too much debt, not backed by gold. And you can see here, US gold reserves really built up massively in the beginning of the 20th century, mainly because the US did very well from both world wars. They provided the world with a lot of the war supplies, food, and everything else. So by the end of 1945, as you can see here, this is data from the World Gold Council. The US had almost 18,000 metric tons of gold. The total official treasury stocks were 28,330. That was in the end of 1945. So the US had 63% of the gold in the world. But as I said earlier, you work and you work, you accumulate wealth, and then you spend it. And that's what the US has been doing since the end of the war. You can see here the gold reserves got up even above 20,000 metric tons, but they had to close the gold window in 1971. That was the Nixon shock, because the US was basically spending more than it made, and the petrodollar was a military way by force of forcing other countries to demand dollars, even though the US was not going to convert those dollars at a fixed rate to gold anymore. So the petrodollar system has been a system of force, I would say. It's not been an economic system based on honest trade and honest money. And we're told now that the US has just over 8,000 metric tons, but I'm not too sure about that number. But it's a lot less than the 20 or near 20,000 metric tons it had around the end of World War II. So that's what's happened. And that's what's continuing to happen with all the deficits, all the national debt increasing that they've created. Yes, yesterday, President Trump said they're going to stop negotiating on the stimulus. But you can bet eventually they're going to come back with the stimulus after the election or even before it. You never know. We've been through this before with the trade negotiations with China, with all the shenanigans. We could very well have the Republicans and Democrats come up with a deal next week, and that would put a rocket up all asset prices just before the election. But in the end of the day, the US, unfortunately, as a country in general, has been living beyond its means. And that's what the petrodollar system has done. And you just have to look at the current account deficit of the US, budget deficit, the trade deficit. The US has been running deficits. It's been living beyond its means. So losing global reserve currency status, and by that I mean the top dog of reserve currencies, because there are other major currencies that are held as reserves. All it will mean less demand for dollars, and the only way for the United States to attract dollars from foreigners will be either through a lower value of the dollar or higher interest rates. And the dollar is not going to disappear. The dollar is not going to be, change for something else, in my opinion. I don't think the IMF will be able to bring a global reserve currency. I don't think they will succeed in that, because the IMF is only a collection of different nations. I don't think nations around the world are prepared to give up sovereignty to the IMF. I mean, Europe has tried that with the euro. It hasn't really worked that well. They've had a lot of problems. Can you imagine doing that on a world scale? I can't. So that's what it means. Losing major world reserve currency status means relative decline in importance and in wealth and standard of living compared to other countries. That's all it is. It's not a huge deal, in my opinion. And the other thing I found looking at this table of central bank stock of gold going back like to 1900 is that if you look in 1900, official holdings were just over 3,000 tons. And the country that had the most gold back then, surprisingly, was Russia with 661 tons. Second was the United States with 602. And you'd think the UK would have the most gold because it had the global reserve currency back then, but it wasn't. It only had 198 metric tons. So how did the UK or the British Empire keep that global reserve currency status? Well, I think it was the gunboat diplomacy or gunboat standard. Instead of the petrodollar, it was the gunboat that kept the British reserve currency status, much like the petrodollar kept the dollar reserve currency status. So I would say it was also a global reserve currency backed by force, much like the US dollar has been. This table here of central bank gold from 1900 to 1945 could definitely be a subject of another video. I found some very interesting things here. It's the old saying of follow the money, right? So let's get to the markets now. It's just gone past 9 a.m. London. Late yesterday, London time, or about mid-afternoon in the US, everything flipped on the announcement by Donald Trump that he had suspended the negotiations for the stimulus and that he'd wait until after the election, after they'd won. And the markets just flipped completely. The stock market tumbled. The Dow finished down 375, S&P down almost 50, NASDAQ finished down 177 or 1.5% lower. We saw gold and silver get trashed as well. Am I concerned? No, because they will come back with another stimulus. They have to keep stimulating fiscally and monetarily unless they want the whole system to implode on its own. And even if that happens, you want to have precious metals. So nothing changes. I think what happened yesterday, it's given people a chance maybe to buy a bit more, buy the dip. That's what's happened. I noticed, though, before the announcement by Trump that they were keeping silver suppressed kind of yesterday. Gold was trying to break out of that 1920 resistance. You would have thought silver would have been raging ahead at that time, but no, it was down on the day, and all of a sudden it was down more, and then they were able to flip gold back below 1920. It's par for the course, but it will not succeed in the long term, as I have said. So right now, as I speak, gold is up $14 from the late close yesterday at $18.92. The low has been $18.72. So yeah, we're still stuck around this 1900 level, above and below. And we just need to be patient, as I've said. Silver is up 67 cents or almost 3% higher at 23.72. The low overnight has been 22.99 and the high 23.82. The Dow is rebounded. I think people realize that there will be stimulus. They've just delayed it a little bit, and it'll probably be a huge one as well. So the Dow is up 237, just under 1%. The S&P future is up 25, 0.75%. NASDAQ 100 future is up 0.2%. The currencies got hit hard yesterday, along with everything else after the announcement. But now they've rebounded. The pound is up about a third at 129.24. Euro is up 0.25%, 117.60. And the dollar is up versus the yen about 0.25% at 105.87. Oil price, WTI crude is at 40.29, down just over 1%, but still fairly steady around this 40 level. 10-year yield, we saw the 10-year yield drop yesterday as well on the back of the stimulus news, but now it's rebounding overnight. It's up 3 basis points. It's getting close to that 0.80 level that I've spoken about, 0.8%. We're now at 0.77, the 10-year yield. So there you go. If you enjoyed this video, make sure you hit the like button. Please share it far and wide. Think about subscribing to my channel if you haven't yet. And also follow me on Twitter and Facebook. I wish you all a great day. Take care. Bye.